Welcome to UFHL Now! A close-up look at the ultimate fantasy hockey league. The most realistic fantasy gameplay. High stakes. High reward. Here's your host, the owner of Duckman's domination in the UFHL, and the mighty Mallards of the UFAHL, Dean Millard.
Hey there, and welcome to another episode of UFHL Now, here proudly broadcast on Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network, your one-stop shop for fantasy sports. We want to bring you everything, hockey, football, you name it, and we're trying to do that on UFSN. My name is Dean Millard, as mentioned, owner of Duckman's Domination, the Mighty Mallards, as well as head of baseball for UFFS, and we have our UFLB auctions in November. I want to remind anybody out there who is interested in getting in the Ultimate Fantasy League baseball. But we are here to talk about UFHL Now, and the UFHL, proudly sponsored by Instat, a terrific tool for anybody out there wanting to get into the scouting game, and owners of franchises in the UFHL get exclusive perks of Instat. So check that out, and we thank them very much for being a part of the program. If you would like to get in touch with UFFS, it's at UFFS Network, at UFS Network on Twitter, and you can email UFSN at UFFsports.com. And if you'd like to reach Duckman's Domination on Twitter, we are at Ducks Domination. On the show today, Larry Fisher, UFHL Insider, as usual, will bring the goods. We're going to chat about the newest digital athlete NFT. The Hammer is unretired, and he will be patrolling the Legends League. Dave Schultz is in the UFFS house, and it is awesome. Owner meetings are coming up in the UFHL. I will be proposing to get rid of plus minus. It is the worst archaic stat. It's a team stat in an individual fantasy gameplay system. That's all I'm going to give you. I will give you my proposal and my reasons on Saturday at the owner meetings, but there's a lot of other scoring categories that will be discussed. Larry and I will run through some of the trades, some of the signings, and what you need to know about if you want to buy out a player on your UFHL roster. All of that with the UFHL Insider now.
Time to get the scoop on the UFHL with our insider, Larry Fisher. He's had lines in the water all week long. What will he reel in for us today? Let's dive in and find out what's going on with the UFHL now!
Larry, welcome back to the show. I always love chatting about the big things going on in the UFHL right now, and we'll get to a lot of those things very shortly. But I also love it when we can dip into the past and we can have a guy who is hashtag unretired, which is one of the coolest things I love about this platform. So tell us about the newest digital athlete NFT who is unretired and will be bashing it around in the Legends League.
Bashing it around indeed, Dean. The Hammer is back. Dave Schultz, Dave the Hammer Schultz, legendary enforcer from the Philadelphia Flyers, the Broad Street Bullies of the 1970s. Dave was such a huge part of that franchise. Philadelphia's only won 2 Stanley Cups in their history. Dave was a part of both of them. Obviously known for his enforcing, but a heck of a hockey player as well. He originally comes from Rosetown, Waldheim, Saskatchewan, which is a nice feel-good story because the UFFS founders are all from Saskatchewan, as well as myself, Dean. So 535 NHL games played, regular season games, 2,706 penalty minutes. NHL record. He still holds the NHL record, 472 penalty minutes, Dean. And I don't think that one's going to be broken, just with the way the modern game is. So, but again, 2-time Stanley Cup champions, series clinching overtime goal in 1974 en route to their first Stanley Cup. So he's a legend in Philly, and now he's a legend on the UFFS platform.
Yeah, indeed. He is such a legend in Philly, and he spent so much time in the penalty box. They had, I think he actually, did he not record his own hit song about the penalty box?
He did. Again, in the prime of his career, he was, everybody was tuning into the local radio airwaves in Philadelphia to hear the penalty box by Dave Schultz. So he, again, just a real fun guy off the ice. I got to meet him a couple months back in a bit of a conference call with himself and Glenn Healy and some of the guys from the NHL Alumni Association. And again, just a real good guy, good sense of humor. And you find that, Dean, a lot of the enforcers on the ice are the funniest guys and the nicest guys off the ice. I've got to know Clark Gillies a little bit over the years. He came out here to play in Bob Bourne's Fantasy Greats hockey camp in the summer in West Kelowna. And I always got to sit beside Clark Gillies in the room, and Justin Bourne was always there. And yeah, you get Clark Gillies telling stories, and it keeps everybody laughing. And I think Dave Schultz much the same, just a real good sense of humor, real good, hardworking Saskatchewan boy who made good and became a big name in the NHL, and now obviously a big name potentially in the Legends League when UFF Sports gets the hockey legends up and running, hopefully in 2022.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. You mentioned that record will never be broken in the NHL. I totally agree with you, but he might break his own record in the Legends League. If we were, I don't know what the format is going to be, but if you ever took like the best career season, well, there it is right there, the biggest penalty minute leader. So imagine in the Legends League, Dave Schultz and Bob Probert going toe-to-toe, because that's what we will see in those things. You know, those players just need to be drafted in, and they will have extreme value. Wayne Gretzky setting up Alexander Ovechkin, that can happen in the Legends League. But Dave Schultz, he could be very, very valuable in a Legends League as producing points. And keep in mind, those players, they get tied back into that revenue. So this could be a really good thing for Dave Schultz. Well, we know it is. And for the team owner who eventually drafts him in the Legends League, because this guy can produce. He scored the overtime clinching goal. He has a song about the penalty box because he spent so much time in there. This could be a big payoff for whoever has him in the Legends League.
I think so too, Dean. Especially penalty minutes will be a category. The scoring system will be somewhat similar to the UFHL. And when you're talking about the single season record holder for penalty minutes, I mean, why wouldn't you want him on your Legends franchise, right? So I think it's going to be fun to watch the Hammer, like I said, come out of retirement and star in the Legends League, and certainly the fact he's already a digital athlete NFT, whoever drafts him there gets that immediate connection and relationship, and I think there's a lot of marketing possibilities. Maybe he does a redo as an NFT of the penalty box song as well. The potential is limitless with this platform, and certainly Dave Schultz will have a big role going forward on the hockey side and the Legends side.
I can't believe a hardware store hasn't signed this guy up long-term as the Hammer endorsement. I mean, that's just a no-brainer. But yeah, looking forward to the many things that we can do, especially with Dave. Welcome to the team, Hammer. A hashtag unretired. Okay, so that's a blast from the past. We're going to go back into the most recent past, though. As in just recently, months ago, when Luc Grenier won the Klein Cup as then owner of Red Army, and he really got to start celebrating that this week.
Yeah, a bit of a wait, but worth the wait. He's now got the Klein Cup has arrived in Quebec, and there's Luc. You can't wipe that smile off his face there. He's so happy and proud to have his hands on the Klein Cup, his name engraved on the Klein Cup, as you see there on the right, and I know, Dean, that Luc Grenier really misses the UFHL. Obviously, he had some family stuff come up that had to take precedent or priority over fantasy, and so he had to step aside and sell the Red Army franchise. But he misses the UFHL. Bit disappointed he didn't get in on the UFAHL football auction franchise, but I think we'll see him back. I think he'll circle back, whether it's the Legends League for hockey or potentially baseball. I don't think this is the last we've seen of Luc Grenier in the UFFS ecosystem, and it was great to see him make a quick appearance on Telegram when the cup arrived, and even got out a Putin gift there. So we haven't seen the last of the silent partner either, Dean. But certainly as far as the accomplishment goes, well earned. Obviously, Luc was a trailblazer, and he will go down as, even though it was a one and done, he was only in the UFHL for one season, he will go down as a UFHL legend as far as really paving the way for a franchise and an ownership group as far as the team he assembled with Red Army. And then, he lost a lot of players at the end of the regular season, came up just short in a second place finish, and had to really rebuild through the playoff draft. Big Montreal Canadiens fan. They were a heavy underdog. Obviously, we know they rallied over Toronto, but Luc went into the playoff draft prior to the playoffs and picked 9 Montreal Canadiens. So put all his eggs in one basket and really, drafted guys like Carey Price and Cole Caulfield as a young guy, and really, put together this Montreal-driven team. And obviously the success Montreal had making it to the Stanley Cup final is the reason we see Luc posing with the Klein Cup, there. And certainly, Dean, the other thing worth noting, he's still planning to do a little parade with it and get some more. We will see a lot more of Luc with the Klein Cup, and I believe he still has a poutine feast planned as well. But unfortunately, Dean, the Lightning players, Matthew Joseph and Cedric Paquette, stole Luc's thunder by eating poutine from the Stanley Cup. They had their day with the cup before Luc could get his hands on the Klein Cup. So, but I'm sure he's got a lot of fun things planned. Luc's a character, as we all know, and he's going to have some fun with the Klein Cup this summer.
Yeah, as he should. Well earned. How he worked that first draft, which was, allowed. It was nothing illegal about it. It was just amazing. And then the amount of money he spent to put together a roster, he should enjoy that Klein Cup. I miss Luc. I don't miss the silent partner. I'll be honest about that, but I do miss Luc and hope to see him back. We have, basketball and baseball auctions coming up very soon. Basketball at the end of September and baseball in early November. So I'd love to see Luc with a team in baseball possibly. And, when he gets back in and when we get baseball going, we will eventually have owners meetings. If people don't know and they're tuning in for the first time, this isn't just once the season is over, you come back in October and draft, because we don't even do that. We have a series of events all summer that will be taking place. One of them is this Saturday. So let's discuss what will be discussed at the first of 3 owner meetings.
Yeah, Dean, the commissioner doesn't make the rules here in the UFHL, largely, or in the UFFS platform. Largely, the franchise owners steer and guide the direction of the league. I mean, there are some platform rules that are non-negotiable, but by and large, gameplay, prize pool distribution, how all that's done, scoring categories, all the rest is derived by voting from the franchises. The franchises have a real say in how the league is run in the direction. And obviously this weekend, tomorrow on Saturday, is the first of 3 off-season owners meetings for the UFHL. So this first meeting agenda is all about the scoring categories, Dean. The big topics are looking like blocked shots. Blocked shots was originally meant to be a category in the UFHL. It was omitted from the scoring system for this past season on Fantrax. So I think there was a handful of franchises said, let's get that in there. Let's make sure it's in there. So providing it gets, we expect unanimous support, but providing it gets 22 or more, 22 plus out of 32 franchises voting in favor, blocked shots will make a return. And the franchises will set also, Dean, not only the category, but the amount of fantasy points that'll be associated with blocked shots or with any of these categories. Plus minus, obviously near and dear to your heart. I know Duckman has made the proposal to remove plus minus, and we'll see how much support that gets. But again, it is an archaic stat. My personal dynasty leagues and keeper leagues have removed plus minus as a scoring category going back probably 5 years now, maybe even closer to 10 years. So a lot of fantasy leagues are trending away from plus minus, and that'll be a discussion whether to lower the point value for plus minus or get rid of it entirely. Penalty minutes, penalties drawn, and fights. So here's the Dave Schultz categories. Maybe not penalties drawn, although I'm sure he drew a few when guys tried to come after him over the years too. But penalty minutes are weighted quite heavily. There's a number of proposals to perhaps lower the weighting on penalty minutes, maybe not for next season, but for future seasons. If possible, to add the penalty drawn, because a lot of people think you should be rewarded for drawing another player into a penalty as much as or more as you should be for taking a penalty yourself. And then fights. Currently, fights aren't a separate category from penalty minutes in the UFHL. But through the advanced scoring system on Fantrax, you could add a fighting major as a separate category for points, and that's been proposed by a couple franchises. And then hits, Dean. This was one that Ryan Malone touched on in Telegram when he first purchased the Dynasty franchise. He said it's a lot easier to run around the ice and bump into somebody than it is to get a shot on goal or some of these other categories. And so potentially there is a motion put forward or a proposed change that the weighting on hits would also come down. So obviously the physical players, the guys that get penalty minutes and hits, are very valuable in the UFHL as of today. There are franchises that would like to see that perhaps mirror the regular season or the NHL real world value a little closer. A guy like Matt Martin, for example, Dean, I believe based on his hit total from last season or his averaged hit total, he would be getting the equivalent of 33 assists every year just from hits in the point equation. So that's obviously a pretty high number for hits. So potentially to lower hits slightly, not to obviously remove it as a category, but look at the weighting of hits. And then for the future, Dean, this isn't for this coming season, but there are proposals to start looking at shorthanded time on ice and even strength time on ice, and some combination of those two or one or the other, as far as potentially that could be the category that eventually replaces or is substituted for plus minus to award players that are still on the ice. And guys like Jacob Slav and these guys, Marc-Edouard Vlasic, we talked about it last week, Dean, that have a lot of real world value, but it's hard to get them the fantasy value that mirrors their real world value by introducing shorthanded time on ice or time on ice and rewarding them for logging a lot of minutes, rewarding them for their ice time. I think that's a category that'll get some traction. But again, all these topics we're talking about in regards to scoring categories, Dean, they'll be, hopefully we'll have full attendance tomorrow afternoon when we do the owners meetings, and following the owners meetings, they'll be put to vote via email. So you'll discuss and debate during the meeting, and then we'll send out the actual topics to vote on, and the franchises will submit their votes via email, anonymous email. So ice time will be another big talking point for the future. And then there are specific proposals from the Brutes, the Battlehawks, Duckmans, and Stallions involving the categories above that are listed here, as well as some other categories, bumping up goals from 2.5 to 3 fantasy points, goalie wins the same. There are some other suggestions in those proposals as well. So lots to review and lots to discuss as far as perfecting this scoring system and scoring categories going forward, because it is evolving from year to year, as it will continue to do in the UFHL.
Well, an interesting point on that for a future meeting that we'll be talking about, and I think that this is really good, as far as transitioning into a UFHL fully league and relying on UFHL statistics, but also helps out the business side.
Definitely, Dean. I think this is something that it's an addition to the meeting 3 agenda. We accidentally forgot to include it, but we're looking at transitioning to UFHL awards. So in this past season, all the real world NHL awards, so the Hart Trophy, the weekly 3 stars, the Rookie of the Month, all those awards were awarded in the UFHL, but based on the NHL real world stats and who won it in the NHL. If Kirill Kaprizov was the Rookie of the Year, whoever owned Kirill Kaprizov got a payout. But now we're thinking, let's transition all these awards into UFHL fantasy points, because it's slightly different than the real world results. So I think it's a great idea. And I think so then, your players of the week or players of the month would be based on your UFHL fantasy points. So the top 3 fantasy points players of the week, or maybe the top forward, top defender, or top defenseman and top goaltender would all get a payout each week, something like that. But certainly also putting it out there for franchises. We're hoping to get their feedback, their ideas. We have a lot of creative minds in the UFHL. So You can email the commissioner if you're listening and you have an idea on basically, what stats should we give awards or trophies to, and what should they be called, and that includes your year-end awards, right? As far as the Hart Trophy, the Art Ross Trophy, we're not going to call them the same as the NHL. We're going to name them. And Dean, that's where you touched on it. But I think the opportunity for sponsorship and bringing on our partners to be involved here. I just brainstorming earlier today. The elite prospects, players of the week or players of the month, the Fanalytica Rookie of the Month or Fanalytica Rookie of the Year, or maybe the Puckpedia GM of the Year. I think these are, options that could, reward our sponsors and get them more involved and get them more name recognition on the platform. And in turn, there's obviously value added for UFFS from what those partners bring to the table. We know Instat, obviously, Dean, is the title sponsor of the UFHL, and I believe UFHL Now, presented by Instat, or the league is certainly sponsored by Instat. So it's great to have Instat. It's great to have Fanalytica, Puckpedia, elite prospects, of course, powering our player database. We can't say enough good things about that partnership with elite prospects and how grateful we are to have them on board. So let's reward them a bit and get some of these awards named after them. And mostly let's transition the awards to be, like I said, a full UFHL league where we're focusing on your UFHL accomplishments, not necessarily mirroring exact same accomplishments in the real world.
Yeah, there's lots of different things to do. When the Ultimate Fantasy League Baseball gets going, we won't have the Cy Young Award for the top pitcher. We've already renamed those in honor of players, but there is zero problem with attaching Adidas or some logo, some company, Louisville Slugger or something like that, or whatever sort of partners that we do have that are out there. You can do that, and I think we should have in hockey. I don't think we should have the Hart Memorial Trophy. I think our trophy in the UFHL should be named after something else, whether that's you do an auction and some people get to bid on what sort of name they want to name it within whatever kind of guidelines we provide. And in baseball, we're letting people name the divisions as long as it's named after somebody who is in the Hall of Fame. So there's lots of different options that you can do to get people involved, but I think it's really important for this league to move forward and bring in some of that outside income, because we are going to be providing a lot of value and not just relying on entry fees and high stakes from owners, which is going to be there. But as this league grows, as this network is proof of, we are going to get bigger and better. And I think being able to attach sponsor names to our own awards that are chosen by us, I think is very important and gives our league its identity.
I agree totally, Dean. And I do think, we like to auction off everything in UFFS. We love our auctions. So why not auction off the naming rights? You win the auction, you get to pick the name of the new, most valuable player award or whatever the case. And that could be open to, people within the UFFS ecosystem, as well as sponsors potentially could, or other companies, other groups could get involved in the bidding. And, I know Marty St. Louis group, the 7-7 group just came in. Maybe it's the 7-7 most valuable player award, or who knows, right? But I really think that the Circus Sports quarterback of the year, or whatever the case in football or across all leagues, right? There's a lot of potential here to involve and generate revenue, but also to help with brand recognition and really attach some brands to our early adopters as far as sponsors go. And certainly, Dean, circling back again, just to get the awards back into fantasy points, I think, versus real world points is very important as well. I think a lot of people will like that. It would be a bit of a bummer if the Art Ross Trophy winner in the NHL, Connor McDavid, wasn't the leading fantasy point getter. In the UFHL, obviously he was last year. The award would still go to the same player. But in some cases, maybe the top defenseman award, where they're voting on, different categories to come up with Victor Hedman or whoever. But maybe in the UFHL, the top defenseman award is the defenseman who had the most fantasy points that year. And that could be a different player than the NHL Norris Trophy or Vezina Trophy for goaltenders, or Calder Trophy for rookies. So I think getting that transitioning to UFHL fantasy points in order to make them completely UFHL awards is another big step.
Yeah, and I think it's a really instead of just saying, okay, Connor McDavid is the Hart Trophy winner, so he's the winner in this. Maybe somebody has like a 60-goal, 220-point penalty minute season or something, and ends up shockingly with more fantasy points in because of the combination. And so maybe it's voted on by the owners, or maybe it's a panel. I know the NHL has different things, but I think owners taking ownership is what the UFFS is all about. As you mentioned earlier, the commissioners, the founders, they don't run this. They guide it, but the owners will ultimately make those decisions. So they should have a say in what their awards are called and who does ultimately win their awards, because there are some guys I'm not saying that Brad Marchand is more valuable than Connor McDavid, but Brad Marchand is an extremely valuable fantasy player because he checks a lot of boxes. And Connor McDavid maybe checks a higher amount of some boxes, but doesn't check as many as Brad Marchand does. So there are differences.
There are, and maybe we'll have the Tom Wilson most valuable player award. Again, that's where the penalty minutes and the hits, some franchises would like to change the weighting there slightly. But certainly, like I said, the combination, and especially with defenders and goaltenders, I think, because those awards in the NHL, or even the most valuable player award, right? They're not necessarily, they're more so voting on all sorts of attributes in the real world, where here it would be strictly based on fantasy points now, which would really change things too. But I just think there's a ton of potential. And so as far as the franchises go and what they need to do now, submit your ideas, brainstorm this a bit. This meeting's happening on September 18th. So we have a little bit of a runway here to put forward some ideas and some, really come up with some cool awards. Basically, how many awards are there going to be? What are they going to be for? Are you, how are you doing like I said, even the Player of the Week awards, Dean? Do you want to do the top 3 fantasy points regardless of position, or do you want to do Players of the Week, the top forward, top defenseman, and top goaltender fantasy points per week? So there's all sorts of different ways we can go about this, but we definitely want that feedback from the franchises. So we're not just making the rules. We want to know how many awards there should be, what categories should be awarded, or what the awards should stand for, how you earn the awards. And then obviously the fun part, the naming of the awards. And I love, like you said, Dean, I love naming them after Hall of Fame players. Even like an Art Ross trophy, maybe a Yager award or something, like some of these more recent retirees could be a lot of fun too. But,
maybe you have to name the award after somebody who has actually won it in the past. Like maybe that's the criteria. They don't have to be a Hall of Famer per se. You could go with the Jim Carrey Award as the Rookie of the Year, the net detective who was vanished right away, but maybe they have to have won the award or something. I don't know. There's lots of possibilities that can kind of get to go out there. But the one thing I want to point out is that if you don't bring forth your idea, it's not going to get discussed. I reached out to you the other day and I'm like, hey, did our payout ever get changed as far as, paying all the teams or just paying the playoff teams? But if nobody submits it, it's not going to happen. So if you have a specific idea, it needs to be submitted. So if you want that, okay, the player that is named after the award has to have won the award once or something like that, you have to actually put that in specifically. Otherwise, the commission and Commissioner Andrea and you guys that are handling things, they can't read everybody's mind. So very important. If you don't suggest it, it won't be discussed or put forth.
Exactly, Dean. And for this particular topic that we're talking about here today, like I said, the meeting deciding and the voting and stuff will take place September 18th and forward to September 26th. So you do have a couple weeks to think about these ideas. Email them to the commissioner or DM Andrea Karandek on Telegram. Get her your ideas, your official ideas for these awards. And certainly, hopefully we have a lot of feedback come in, because I think this has the potential to be a lot of fun going forward.
Yeah, I agree. I think it could be some really creative stuff. All right, let's get to the weekly trade roundup. And not as busy as some weeks that we've talked about, but still some action going on.
Yeah, Dean, the Monarchs and Kamikaze were two of the busier franchises. They were each involved in a couple different trades. But in this case, the Kamikaze were able to, I know they weren't, Donnie Talk didn't love that Jonathan Bernier contract with New Jersey at $4.125 million, but the Monarchs with George Batchel as GM, they don't know the status of Ben Bishop yet. They traded away Tristan Jarry. Their only other goaltender is Jonathan Decord, so they really needed a goalie to step in, and one that's going to be playing and potentially Jonathan Bernier is probably the backup behind Mackenzie Blackwood, but at $4.125 million, you're probably hoping he's at least a platooner in New Jersey. So the Monarchs identified him as a goalie that was available in exchange for Oliver Kapanen, who was a second-round pick in this year's entry auction, 62nd overall to the Monarchs. So a bit of a minor trade there, but I think Donnie Talk with Kamikaze, Dean, I think they have quite the goaltending pipeline going. I looked into it. I know they signed Joseph Corner, Arizona's number 2 goaltender as of today. They signed him from their affiliated scouting agency, Easton Scouting Solutions, to sort of replace Jonathan Bernier behind John Gibson. They have their stud starting goaltender in John Gibson. But now they have 2 waiver-exempt backups, Dean, in Corner and Philip Gustafson, that they can shuffle in and out, which is always nice having 2 waiver-exempt guys that you can rotate in and out. And then also you look at Kamikaze and what they have coming, Dean. They have Joel Hofer, Dustin Wolf, Daniil Tarasov, and Hugo Elmefelt in their system. So they have 4 high-end goaltenders potentially coming to push John Gibson in the future, as well as the 2 waiver-exempt backups, both entering their final season of waiver exemption, Dean. So Kamikaze will have to make a decision on Corner or Gustafson going forward to not risk losing one of them on waivers in future seasons. But certainly for Monarchs, their focus was to shore up the goaltending with the uncertainty of Ben Bishop, and they added Jonathan Bernier.
Well, speaking of goaltenders, the Brutes and the Outlaws did a little deal involving a tender.
Dean, in this case, the Brutes traded Jake Allen and their 2022 second-round pick to the Outlaws for TJ Oshie. The Brutes had a crowded crease with Philip Grubauer and James Reimer making Jake Allen expendable. The Outlaws, on the other hand, they needed another goaltender to pair with UC Saros after his Nashville goaltending partner Pekka Rinne retired for the Outlaws. So I was looking at this trade. I think it's pretty fair value. I think the Outlaws maybe could have pried away Nashville goaltending prospect Connor Ingram in this package to keep that Nashville pipeline going. He's owned by the Brutes. But both franchises really addressed a need in this trade, Dean. The Brutes needed to replace a top 6 forward after David Krejci's surprising departure to Europe. So TJ Oshie at 4 more years at $5.75 million. That's a nice contract. It's cheaper than what Krejci was for the Brutes last year at $7.25 million. So a nice replacement as far as a top 6 forward goes. Krejci out, Oshie in for the Brutes. And on the other side, certainly Jake Allen, platooning likely with Carey Price. The Montreal try to keep Price fresh for the playoffs again. So Jake Allen will get his share of starts in Montreal, and he'll pair with UC Saros for the Outlaws. So both teams, Outlaws addressed their goaltending, and the Brutes managed to replace that hole in their top 6 forwards.
Well, and the Outlaws certainly weren't done after that one because they went out and had to replace Oshie.
Exactly. Chain reaction here. The Outlaws wanting to replace Oshie acquired Ondrej Kase from the Kamikaze, who Donnie Talks back again. Kamikaze in exchange for forward prospect Jamison Reese. This trade, Dean, really, I think Kase landed in Toronto on a 1-year, $1.25 million contract that could be great value for both the Leafs and the Outlaws. If Kase stays healthy, he's obviously had concussion issues. That's why he was a low cap hit, low risk contract for Toronto. And then Jamison Reese is a really promising prospect. He's got a great motor on him, and he's one of those kids you can just tell is motivated to be an impact player in the NHL. He's got a bit of an agitating side, almost like a Brad Marchand, and just another addition to Kamikaze's impressive prospect pool. The amount of recent first rounders that Donnie Talk has assembled there for the next wave of Kamikaze, guys like Vitaly Kravtsov and Logan Brown, Connor McMichael, Jack Quinn, Matthew Boldy, Brendan Brisson. The list goes on of recent first rounders maturing or over ripening on the Kamikaze protected list. And I do think Kamikaze is one of those franchises, much like Duckman's, Dean, that are poised to be on the rise in that daunting Orr division in the years to come. But for now, the Outlaws are still trying to contend, or still are contending. Should have a good spot in the top 4 in the Howe division, or they were a playoff team this past season. So certainly they want to maintain that. So like I said, it's kind of a musical chairs here. They needed a goaltender. They get Jake Allen at the cost of TJ Oshie. Well, now they replace Oshie with Ondrej Kase.
All right, we started with the Monarchs. Let's finish with the Monarchs. They also had a minor deal.
Yeah, last but not least, or maybe it is least, Dean Kukan, a depth defenseman from the Assassins to the Monarchs in exchange for Mason Primo, a forward prospect for Vegas. That last name's probably familiar. That is the son of Wayne and the nephew of Keith Primo. And Mason is much like his dad and his uncle, a 6'5" center. So the Assassins will hope he trends up like his dad and his uncle Keith. But certainly Dean Kukan is a nice depth addition on the defense for the Monarchs as well.
Okay, so the one thing that we always have to be aware of as owners in the UFHL and maybe whatever league you're involved in on the UFFS platform is that we mirror the NHL. So we mirror the NHL's salary cap. And that's why, I was able to grab a few guys this offseason because they signed big deals and the teams can no longer afford them. So we're always on the lookout. You always have to be watching to see when your player or players are signing because you have 24 hours to then say, I don't want this contract. I'm walking away from it. And you can do that. If you do nothing, you just keep the player. And there were some significant player signings this week.
Yeah, Dean, roster moves in general in the NHL. Obviously, you have to make them relevant to the UFHL and keep tabs on them at all times. The big news, I think the biggest signing or the two biggest signings were obviously Ondrej Svechnikov in Carolina, which was good news for Terry Weber in Strong Island. The Hurricanes locked him up for 8 years at $7.75 million. So again, Terry Weber has to be happy with that contract. And Dean, I think this is good news for Sean Cosgrove and the Warriors when it comes to Elias Pettersson. I think he'll be coming in at a similar cap hit. Some were thinking maybe he'd be long-term at the 9 or 10 million and going for the Mitch Marner contract. I don't think he'll go much higher than Ondrej Svechnikov now. So good news for potentially for the Warriors and the Vancouver Canucks to see Ondrej Svechnikov come in at 8 years and $7.75 million. And then an identical contract, Dean, for a player that's a little bit older, Sean Couturier for the Yetis. Also got an 8-year extension, $7.75 million with the Flyers. If you could take Ondrej Svechnikov or Sean Couturier at the exact same term and same price over the next 8 years, you're probably going to take Svechnikov. Mm-hmm. He's younger. He's got the upside. He has the potential to be a real sniper in the NHL. But Sean Couturier has been so valuable to the Philadelphia Flyers. He was underpaid throughout his 20s. He had one of the best contracts in the league. And now we're going to see how his value holds up long-term at this new deal. But again, Scott Lowater, he likes to wheel and deal. So I think it's unlikely Couturier will be a Yeti for the long haul for the full 8 years. But in the meantime, I think that's a fair value contract. Dylan Dubé, Dean, this is an interesting one. Good news for the Eliminators. He signs a 3-year term at a modest $2.3 million. So some nice cost certainty there for Calgary. And for Luke Schonweiss, the owner GM of the Eliminators, Dean. And Luke actually parted ways with Sam Reinhart in the expansion draft. They agreed that the Bentley Jacks would take Sam Reinhart in order to avoid losing or in order for the Bentley Jacks to not select Dylan Dubé. So interestingly, Reinhart was traded to Florida and signed a 3-year deal at a $6.5 million cap hit shortly thereafter. So when in hindsight, the Eliminators managed to save over $4 million in cap space by going with Dubé instead of Reinhart there. And obviously Luke Schonweiss is a Flames fan, so that makes the decision that much easier. Travis Sanheim, again, we got a couple Flames and a couple Flyers on this list, Dean, but Travis Sanheim for the Tornadoes extended 2 years at $4.65 million. That was to avoid arbitration. Seems like a fair number. The Godfathers, Juuso Välimäki, they acquired him this offseason. He was extended by the Flames for 2 years at $1.55 million. And I expect Juuso Välimäki to really break out and emerge over these 2 seasons. So I think that's great value. I think he'll outperform that cap hit. So the Godfather's got to be loving that. And some other deals that came down this week, Dean, that are of lesser interest but still deserve mention. Derek Brassard of the Battlehawks signed a 1-year deal at $825,000 with the Flyers. Nikita Zadorov of the Yetis He avoided arbitration with the Flames at 1 year, 3.75. And actually, Zadorov was recently acquired in a trade by the Yetis. And Scott Lowater said he was hoping for that 3.5 million range. So he got it. I'm sure he's happy with the Zadorov contract. And then some non-signings that are of interest. Dean, Franz Nielsen was bought out by Detroit. So that's a buyout for the Monarchs, who have to be happy there. The way it works in the UFHL, if the NHL team buys out a player, the Monarchs get the new cap hit without any recapture penalties. So again, now Franz Nielsen's 5 million comes off the books, and the Monarchs will get him at whatever he signs for next, if it's $1 million or less, similar to other free agents that were bought out like James Neal that are looking for new contracts. Valtteri Filppula, Dean, is heading overseas. He's Switzerland bound for the Battlehawks. Presumably done in the NHL pending his retirement papers, but Mick Portoni, the Battlehawks GM, may get to watch him live in Switzerland, so that could be a win-win for the Battlehawks. And last but not least, Dean, Henrik Lundqvist retired from the NHL, retired from the Snipers. His next stop is the Legends League, obviously, for one of the best goaltenders of all time, arguably the best Swedish netminder in history. So Alex LeBlanc purposely went out and acquired Henrik Lundqvist for the Snipers shortly after taking ownership, obviously with the Legends League in mind, and now he gets his wish with Henrik Lundqvist retiring.
Maybe Henrik and Dave Schultz will play on the same Legends League team, and that's the thing. You know, players retire. You don't have to drop them. You don't have to. You can move them to a retired list, but you have to wait for them to announce that retirement first. So that's the thing. If there's a choice, if you need roster space, you might not be able to wait for a guy to announce his retirement, depending on what it is. And, you know, for some of the players, you're going to wait because they're going to be valuable members in the Legends League and obviously bring forth a lot more return on investment there. Okay, so the last thing we want to get to, and I guess is the insider advice, is a reminder about an upcoming deadline if you want to get rid of a player.
Yeah, speaking of buyouts, Dean, the UFHL buyout deadline is also tomorrow, 11:59 p.m. Eastern on Saturday. So this is your last chance if you want to buy out a contract for the coming season. Obviously, use that buyout calculator we talked about last week, Dean, on Cap Friendly. Their buyout calculator tool, very important to see what kind of penalty you're going to be hit with that cap recapture. But the last chance for UFHL buyouts prior to next off season. That buyout window, Dean, it always opens 48 hours after the Klein Cup Stanley Cup is awarded. So 2 days after the Cup final ends will be your next chance to do a buyout if you don't do it by tomorrow night. Free agency is ongoing, though, Dean, so you still have 24 hours after every new signing to release the player if franchises don't want to retain the new contract, which you highlighted, or they don't like the new landing spot. Maybe you're an anti-Flames fan and you won't have anybody that plays for the Flames on your franchise. Maybe you can't even bother to try and negotiate a trade to get rid of them. It just, the sight of them with the Flames bothers you so much, you just outright release them within that 24-hour window. But nonetheless, free agency is ongoing because, as you know, in the NHL, Dean, there's probably almost 100 NHL caliber players that are still either restricted free agent or unrestricted free agent. And then leading in with that, Dean, unsigned players. So all these players that are still unsigned or players that are heading overseas, if they don't have a contract by the roster deadline in early October, they can start the season on your protected list without requiring waivers. Because if they don't have a contract, there's nothing to waive if they don't have an NHL contract. So if they're in the KHL, but they're waiver eligible in the NHL, but they're over in the KHL, like Valtteri Filppula, or they have a contract holdout and they're not at training camp and that roster deadline comes and goes, you can start them on your protected list without requiring waivers. But they do require waivers, Dean, upon signing an NHL contract. So whenever they sign, franchises again have 24 hours to make room for them on the active roster, or else they go to a waivers auction. They can't sit on the protected list all season. They still have to, the waiver rules still apply as soon as they sign. So if they get through the roster deadline and they're on the protected list without waivers, then they're marked or flagged as guys that'll need waivers as soon as they sign. And when they sign, you have 24 hours to either make room for them on the active roster or else they go through a waivers auction. But again, a couple of people have asked about guys that are maybe going to Europe or are in Europe. You had a guy last year, Charles Hudon, somebody like that, right? If a player doesn't have an NHL contract, there's nothing to waive because they're not under contract. So they can be safely stored or stashed on the protected list. But again, if you're looking at doing a buyout, that's a different story, and that deadline is tomorrow night.
That's why we didn't ever move Charles Hudon to the minors last year. We obviously knew we were going to suck, so it's not like we were, going to put in somebody that was going to get us out of 32nd place to replace Charles Hudon, but we didn't move him to the minors because when he eventually signed, then we don't have to put him through minors again because he never went to our protected list. But if you are going to put a player in that situation, so there are decisions to make, and I want to be in the league with all of those guys that you talked about that can't stand having a Flames guy or an Oilers guy on their roster because those guys are letting emotion get in the way. And, there's this jersey came because of a Flames player. Johnny Gaudreau was on my original roster of Duckman's Domination, and we won the EA Sports tournament, the Corona Cup, and I got that jersey because Johnny Gaudreau put up some points. I grew up as an Oilers fan, Andy Moog on my wall. I'm Jets guy now who I cheer for, but I still don't like the Flames. But I still like the fantasy points their players give me. So it is, when I used to be a Dolphins fan, I still would draft Tom Brady in fantasy football. So all those guys that let emotion in their play, I want to be in their league because you could take advantage, or you trade them guys, right? Like, oh, here's a Flames guy that I've got. You're a Leafs guy, and they'll overpay. So I want to be in a league with all those guys.
Absolutely. Yeah. It adds a lot of fun. And a lot of people do have those, internal rules or, I don't want anybody over 35 years old or whatever the case. Right. So it is interesting how every franchise, both in the real world and in fantasy, have their strategies. And you see it in the real world with draft strategies. Some NHL teams will not draft a Russian, or now the Carolina Hurricanes owner said, no matter what, do not draft a defenseman in the first round. I don't care if he's the best player by a mile. If they had first overall pick this year, they weren't taking Owen Power, according to the owners. So it is funny how emotion and opinions can really change the way it works, both in the real world and in fantasy.
Yeah, I think everybody should use those hard and fast rules and then come and play in fantasy with me. Like, it's just ludicrous to say, I'm not going to draft a Russian in the first round. I've been told a story about an NHL GM who said, we're never drafting a Czech defenseman. Like, not even in the first round, just never. Like, it was just like, okay, well, something really bad happened to you in the Czech Republic or something like that. So hard and fast rules, in my opinion, are a good way to not succeed. You can have guidelines, like I would love to have no players out over 35, but if the right player over 35 comes along and it fits the right situation, you got to be flexible. So I agree there should be guidelines, but hard and fast rules. Actually, everybody watching out there, keep doing your hard and fast rules. It's very beneficial for the flexible ones, because I just don't think you can do fantasy or actual hockey that way, Larry.
No, yeah, and I'll be honest, Dean, I had another fantasy league that I've been running for, I think we're going into season 12, and I'm one of those guys. I had a no flames rule that I've upheld over the last 12 years. So before some of these UFHL GMs that are in that league call me out on Telegram, I better admit it to you now. But I do have that rule with one of my fantasy franchises. And in that league, though, you're dealing with only 20 teams instead of 32, and there's a big waiver pool or free agents all the time. It's not like here in the UFHL where there's only enough players to go around that there is in the NHL. There's more than enough to go around. You can always avoid a flame, or if your player signs there in the offseason, you can drop them, and there's somebody of near equal caliber available on the waiver wire, but not here in the UFHL. I think that's the big distinction. If I was a GM in the UFHL, I'd probably have to accept the odd flame on my team going forward.
It is so different. That's such a good point. When you're in a 12, 16, even like you said, 20-team league, everybody has top six guys as far as in their lineup. In the UFHL, you need bottom six guys. You need bottom pairing defensemen. And every aspect of UFFS, you will need that. I mean, if you watched UFAHL Nation, the debut episode with Mike Skrzniak, and he had head of football operations Andy McNamara on there, he specifically asked the question, question. Why the heck were so many quarterbacks going in the first round of the UFAHL draft when every other fantasy football draft you are in, you get mocked if you take a quarterback in the top 5 or something like that? People are like, what the heck are you doing? But there are 32 teams. There are only 32 starting quarterbacks. So you can have the strategy and say, I'm going to get my starting quarterback in the futures auction, but you better have an unlimited budget and be prepared to outbid everybody, or else you're getting your quarterback in the second round when everybody else is taken. So this platform destroys a lot of strategies and a lot of conceptions and some misconceptions when it comes to fantasy sports. It is a much different game in UFFS. Bigger, better, and more high stakes than anything out there. And you can't wait for the second or third round of a football draft to get your quarterback, or you're getting a backup. All right. Thanks, as always, Larry, for your time. It's always great to chat with you, and we'll see you at the owner meetings tomorrow.
You're watching the Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network, UFSN, your one-stop fantasy shop. Get in touch on Twitter at UFS Network. Email us, UFSN@UFFsports.com.
Love talking with our UFHL insider, Larry Fisher. And UFF Sports is so unlike anything that you have ever played out there. You have to throw out a lot of those preconceived notions about running backs and things like that. And, Mike Skrzniak, who does UFAHL Nation, asked Andy McNamara the other day on the first episode, why so many quarterbacks are going in the first round? Because there's 32 teams. There's only 32 starting quarterbacks. This isn't your 10, 12, even 20-team dynasty league. This is bigger than anything you've ever been a part of. And ask any owner of a franchise in the UFHL just how realistic it is, and you'll be in for about a 20 to 30, maybe an hour-long conversation. Anyway, this has been nearly an hour-long conversation. Thank you so much for tuning in to UFHL Now, our 25th show. We'll pick things up as we go after the owners' meetings, as we move along, and then into the next season. Big thanks to Larry Fisher for joining me on the program, as he always does. Love his insight and his knowledge, and he has his fingers on the pulse of this league like nobody else. Owner meeting tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern. Make sure you're there. We've got some other really cool things coming behind the scenes when it comes to UFF Sports for sure. For Larry Fisher, my name is Dean Millard, owner of Duckman's Domination. We aim to dominate starting 22-23. Have yourself a wonderful weekend. We'll talk soon.
UFHL Now is produced by DM Productions. To get in touch, head to www.podcastalley.ca.